Welcome to Lesson 6 of Singularity Sanctuary's Ethics and Technology course, Education, Learning, Character, and the Use of AI. Currently, one of the most discussed ethical dilemmas surrounding technology appears in education, the use of artificial intelligence in learning and coursework. Should students be allowed to use AI to help with their studies or assignments? In July of 2025, a global group of nearly 1,000 educators and academics issued an open letter declaring, "With this letter, we take a principled stand against the proliferation of so-called AI technologies in universities." They went on to warn that AI undermines basic pedagogical values, scientific integrity, independence, and transparency, and that it hinders learning and de-skills critical thought. Some institutions have responded by restricting or outright prohibiting AI use. Brown University, for example, requires that application materials be entirely original and exclude anything generated by artificial intelligence. Many professors and teachers have taken personal stands against AI in their classrooms, citing concerns about inaccuracy and weakening writing and reasoning skills. At the other end of the spectrum, some schools have embraced AI extensively. Alpha School, a private K-12 network, uses AI tutors for core subjects, allowing students to learn at their own pace. Sumner County School District in Tennessee has integrated an AI assistant called Mojo, reporting improvements in standardized test scores. These supporters of its use argue that AI can personalize learning, accelerate mastery, and make education more engaging and productive. In 2025, for example, high school senior Mateo Paz used AI to identify more than 1.5 million previously unknown objects in space, an achievement that earned him first place and $250,000 in the Regeneron Science Talent Search. Critics, however, see AI use as a form of cheating that prevents students from developing critical thinking and independence. These concerns are understandable, but from the perspective of the humanistic ethic, a deeper question comes first. Not how do we stop students from using AI, but what is education for? There's that first principles thinking again. If education exists primarily to enforce compliance, measure performance, and produce standardized outputs, then AI does pose a threat because it exposes how fragile and outdated that model has become. But if education exists to support human growth, to develop understanding, judgment, creativity, empathy, and character, then AI becomes something else entirely. It becomes a tool. And like all tools, its ethical significance depends on how and why it is used. The humanistic ethic reminds us that learning is not about producing work, it's about unfolding as a person. Education is not merely memorizing, it is the cultivation of independent reasoning. It is not about credentials, but about becoming a lifelong learner. It is not about being marketable, but about becoming a good human being. It's about unlocking one's potential, not defining it. Seen this way, the ethical problem is not that students use AI, it is when AI or anything else is used to avoid learning. This distinction matters because there's a serious difference between using AI to generate work one does not understand and using it to explore ideas, clarify concepts, discover connections, and deepen one's understanding. When that is, it is used to genuinely learn and to do so more productively than a student can without it. AI can bypass growth, but it can also accelerate it. But education has faced ethical dilemmas concerning the use of emerging technologies before, including the use of computers and the internet in schools. Ethical concerns about whether to even allow them in the classroom very quickly turned into concerns about those students who didn't have access to them at all. When digital calculators became common in the 1970s, when I was still in grade school, we were forbidden from bringing them to class or using them to do our homework. Our teachers believed it was essential for us to show our work and prove that we could solve the math problems on our own. But by the time my children were in school, especially in advanced math classes, we were expected to buy them some of the most advanced and expensive calculators available. This didn't mean that they didn't understand how to solve problems. It meant they could solve them faster and solve more of them. Likewise, when I was in college, long before the internet, most of our research took place in the university library, which was limited in what it had to offer, a scarcity that was exacerbated by too many students competing for the same materials. In those days, an expert wasn't someone who had all the answers memorized, but someone who had general knowledge and knew which books to consult for specific information. Today, anyone can access far more information than the greatest scholars of earlier generations could fit into their heads or on their bookshelves. But it turns out calculators did not destroy math, search engines did not destroy research, spell check did not destroy writing. Each time the ethical challenge was the same, whether we would redesign education to emphasize understanding, or rote performance, or cling to models that confuse difficulty with learning. Today, information is more abundant than ever, and our ethical task is not to prevent students from accessing it, but to adapt how we educate them to make certain that learning isn't merely how we access information, but knowing how to use it wisely. From a character-based perspective, then, the central question becomes, what kind of learner is a student becoming by using AI? This question matters far more than whether an assignment is technically completed unaided. In an age where information is abundant and intelligence is augmented, the ethical purpose of education shifts upward on Maslow's hierarchy. Meaning-making, critical thinking, moral reasoning, and creativity become central. From this perspective, banning AI outright is not an ethical solution. It is an avoidance strategy. It treats students as potential offenders rather than developing their moral character. It prioritizes control over character. A humanistic approach does something different. It teaches students how to use powerful tools responsibly. It emphasizes transparency, reflection, and intention while promoting their creativity and productivity. It asks students to explain their thinking, not merely submit results. It reframes learning around synthesis, insight, and judgment, things AI cannot replace. Most importantly, it treats students with dignity. The goal is not to outsmart technology, it is to outgrow dependency upon it, which requires trust, guidance, and ethical formation, not evaluation, and certainly not surveillance. This does not mean anything goes. Using AI to misrepresent one's understanding is still dishonest. Passing off machine-generated work as learning still undermines growth. But these are failures of character, not merely violations of rules. And character is formed through modeling, mentoring, and meaningful expectations. When we teach students to use AI ethically, we are doing more than managing a classroom issue. We are preparing them for a world in which these tools will be everywhere, at work, in civic life, in creativity, and in personal decision-making. The ethical task of education in an AI-rich world is not preserving the past. It is preparing students to think well, to care deeply, to have integrity, and to act responsibly with extraordinary tools. In the next lesson, we'll turn to housing and ask what it means to ensure stability and dignity when capacity is no longer limited by our technological ability to keep up with demand, but by the ethical choices we are or are not making.